In the summer of 1947, something fell from the sky near Roswell, New Mexico. The military said it was a weather balloon. Then they said it wasn't. Witnesses described wreckage that didn't behave like any metal they'd ever seen. Soldiers were ordered to collect every fragment. Some were told never to speak of it again. Decades later, when documents finally emerged, entire sections were missing. Names were blacked out, dates didn't align. The official story changed 3 times. Each time it raised more questions than it answered. What actually fell that day? And why, after more than 7 decades, does the government still withhold pieces of the truth? This is the story of the Roswell Files. Not the speculation, not the folklore, the documents themselves. The reports that were written, rewritten, and in some cases never released at all. This is about what the military said happened, what witnesses claimed they saw, and the extraordinary gap between the two. Because in the desert outside Roswell, something occurred that required immediate military intervention, a cover story, and decades of silence. The files that remain are fragments of a larger puzzle. Some pieces were destroyed. Others were classified so deeply they've never seen daylight. What we do have reveals a pattern of contradictions, evolving explanations, and a level of secrecy usually reserved for matters of national security. So what was it about this event that required such control? What did those first officers see that made them believe, even briefly, that they had recovered something not of this world? And why has the story been revised so many times that even the official version is difficult to follow? The answer may not be what you expect. It may not be alien. It may not even be extraordinary in the way popular culture imagines. But it is strange. And the documents prove that something profound happened in that desert. Something the military wanted contained, controlled, and in the years that followed, carefully reframed. To understand the Roswell Files, you have to understand the world they emerged from. The summer of 1947 was not ordinary. The Second World War had ended less than 2 years earlier. The atomic bomb had been used. The Soviet Union, once an ally, was now an adversary. The Cold War had begun, and with it, a new kind of anxiety. The United States was no longer just defending its borders, it was defending its skies. Radar stations were being built across the country. Military personnel were trained to identify aircraft at a glance. The fear was not invasion in the traditional sense. It was something faster, something silent, something that could strike without warning. The Pentagon was obsessed with the idea of Soviet bombers carrying nuclear payloads over American cities. Every unidentified object in the sky was a potential threat. And then, in June of 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 objects moving at extraordinary speed near Mount Rainier in Washington. He described their motion as erratic, like saucers skipping across water. The press called them flying saucers. Within days, sightings were reported across the country. Hundreds of them. Most were dismissed. Some were investigated. But the timing mattered. The military was already on edge, already watching the skies, already operating under the assumption that the next war would be fought in the air, with weapons that could end civilization in minutes. In this environment, secrecy was not just policy, it was survival. The Manhattan Project had been kept hidden from Congress, from the public, even from Vice President Harry Truman until he became president. If the government could build an atomic bomb in secret, it could keep other programs hidden too. And it did. By 1947, the U.S. military was conducting high-altitude reconnaissance missions using experimental balloons, aircraft, and radar systems. Some of these programs were so classified that even base commanders weren't fully briefed. Compartmentalization was the rule. Information was shared on a need-to-know basis. If you didn't need to know, you didn't ask. This was the world into which the Roswell incident fell, a world primed for secrecy. A world where the default response to any unusual event was containment first, explanation later. And if the explanation had to change to protect a classified program, so be it. On the morning of July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release. It was brief. It stated that the 509th Bomb Group had recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell. The statement was authorized by the base's public information officer, Lieutenant Walter Haut. It was picked up by local radio stations and newspapers almost immediately. The headline in the Roswell Daily Record read, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." For a few hours, it was the most sensational story in the country. Then, just as quickly, it was retracted. Later that same day, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, held a press conference. He presented wreckage to reporters. He said it was a weather balloon, not a disc, not a craft, a balloon, the kind used for meteorological observation. The press accepted the explanation. The story faded, but the original press release remained. It had been written by a military officer, approved by a base commander. It stated explicitly that a flying disc had been recovered. That statement was never explained. It was simply overwritten. The wreckage itself became the subject of immediate confusion. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who supervised the initial recovery, described material that was unlike anything he had encountered. In interviews conducted decades later, he recalled thin, metallic foil that could not be creased or burned. He described lightweight beams with markings that resembled hieroglyphics. He said the debris was scattered over a wide area, but there was no impact crater, no engine, no identifiable fuselage, just fragments. When Marcel was ordered to transport the material to Fort Worth, he was photographed with the wreckage. But witnesses, including Marcel's own family, later claimed the material shown in those photographs was not the same material he brought home the night of the recovery. They said the real debris was substituted, that what the press saw was staged. Whether this is true cannot be confirmed from the photographs alone, but the claim persists, and it is echoed by other witnesses who handled the wreckage. Mac Brazel, the rancher who first discovered the debris, gave a statement to the press after being held on the base for several days. His account was notably different from his initial report. He downplayed the strangeness of the material. He suggested it might have been a weather device after all. Friends and family later said he had been pressured to change his story, that he was told not to speak about it again. Brazel never discussed the incident publicly after that summer. The military's explanation in 1947 was clear, weather balloon. But the documents that have since emerged suggest the situation was more complex. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a report titled The Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. It was the result of an investigation prompted by inquiries from New Mexico Congressman Stephen Schiff. The report introduced a new explanation. It stated that the debris recovered near Roswell was not from a weather balloon, but from a classified program called Project Mogul. This program involved high-altitude balloons equipped with acoustic sensors designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The balloons were launched from Alamogordo, New Mexico, not far from Roswell. According to the report, one of these balloons, Flight 4, had gone missing in early June 1947. The wreckage found by Mac Brazel was, the Air Force claimed, remnants of this balloon train. The report acknowledged that the initial press release was an error, that the officers involved did not recognize the equipment because Project Mogul was compartmentalized, that the story was corrected within hours. But this explanation, released nearly 50 years after the event, raised its own questions. If the debris was from Project Mogul, why wasn't that explanation given in 1947? Classified programs had cover stories. If the weather balloon explanation was the cover story, why was it used instead of simply saying nothing? And if the officers at Roswell, including an intelligence officer trained to identify foreign and domestic aircraft, could not recognize a balloon array, what does that say about the nature of the debris? The Air Force report addressed some of these concerns. It noted that the Mogul balloons used unusual materials, including metallic reflective radar targets made of foil and balsa wood. It acknowledged that some of the descriptions provided by witnesses could align with these materials, but it did not explain the more exotic claims: the beams with symbols, the indestructibility of the foil, the lack of an identifiable balloon envelope. Critics of the Mogul explanation argue that the materials described by witnesses do not match the components of a balloon train, that the debris field was too large, that the military response was too extensive for a simple balloon recovery. Supporters of the explanation argue that memory is fallible, that witnesses were describing events decades after they occurred, and that the cultural context of flying saucers in 1947 may have colored their recollections. The most significant finding in the 1994 report was the acknowledgement that the original explanation was false. The weather balloon story was not accurate. This was a rare admission. The military does not typically revisit incidents from half a century prior unless there is sustained public pressure or a legal requirement to do so. The fact that the Air Force commissioned a formal investigation suggests that the Roswell incident was seen as a persistent problem, something that required resolution. But the resolution it offered created new problems. Because if the government lied in 1947, even for reasons of national security, how can we trust the explanation given in 1994? This is the dilemma at the heart of the Roswell Files. Each official statement undermines the previous one. Each revision invites skepticism, and the documents themselves are incomplete. In 1997, the Air Force released a second report, titled The Roswell Report, Case Closed. This document addressed claims made by witnesses regarding the recovery of alien bodies. Some individuals, including mortician Glenn Dennis and several former military personnel, had stated that small, non-human bodies were seen at the Roswell base or transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The 1997 report attributed these accounts to confusion with two separate incidents. The first involved high-altitude parachute tests using anthropomorphic dummies, which were dropped from balloons in the 1950s. The second involved a plane crash in 1956 that killed several airmen, some of whom were badly burned and could have been misidentified. The report suggested that witnesses had conflated these events with the 1947 debris recovery, creating a false memory of alien bodies. This explanation was widely criticized. The dummy drops did not begin until 1953, 6 years after the Roswell incident. Witnesses who claimed to have seen bodies in 1947 could not have been confusing events from a decade later. The Air Force argued that memory is not linear, that traumatic or unusual experiences can be displaced in time. But the chronological gap remained a significant issue, and it was never fully resolved. What makes the Roswell Files particularly difficult to analyze is not just what they contain, but what they don't. Key documents are missing. The daily logs from the Roswell base for the period surrounding the incident were never released. Outgoing messages from early July 1947 are absent from the official record. Witness testimony taken at the time has not been located. In some cases, records that should exist simply don't. In others, entire files related to the 509th Bomb Group during this period are incomplete. The General Accounting Office, at the request of Congressman Skiff, conducted a search for records in the early 1990s. It confirmed that documents related to the Roswell incident were missing or had been destroyed. Some were reportedly lost in a fire. Others were disposed of during routine record purges. But the patterns of what is missing are not random. Specific days are absent. Specific communications, specific personnel files. This could be coincidence, it could be bureaucratic negligence, or it could be deliberate. Redaction is another persistent feature of the available documents. When files related to Roswell are released under the Freedom of Information Act, entire sections are blacked out. Names are removed, dates are obscured. Justifications for classification are cited, but the specifics are withheld. Some documents remain classified not because of what they reveal about Roswell, but because they reference other programs that are still sensitive. This makes it nearly impossible to reconstruct a complete picture. What we have are fragments, statements that don't align, timelines that shift, and no central document that ties it all together. The original debris analysis, if it exists, has never been released. The initial intelligence report written by Major Marcel has not been located. The orders given to personnel involved in the recovery are not part of the public record. This absence is as significant as any document that has been released, because it suggests that what happened at Roswell was not treated as a routine event. Routine events generate routine paperwork. This did not. There are broadly 3 interpretations of the Roswell incident. The first is the official explanation, that the debris was from a Project Mogul balloon, that the initial press release was a mistake, and that subsequent claims about alien bodies are the result of misidentification and faulty memory. This explanation is supported by the Air Force reports, by the acknowledgement of the Mogul program's existence, and by the lack of physical evidence to support more exotic claims. The second interpretation is that the debris was from a classified craft, possibly experimental, possibly foreign, and that the cover-up was designed to protect a program unrelated to balloons. Some researchers have suggested the wreckage was from a secret U.S. aircraft, a captured Nazi technology, or even a Soviet reconnaissance device. This would explain the intense secrecy the changing explanations, and the absence of records. It would also align with the broader context of post-war technological competition. The third interpretation is the one most widely known, that the debris was extraterrestrial, that non-human bodies were recovered, that the government has concealed this information for more than 7 decades. This interpretation relies heavily on witness testimony, on the claims of deathbed confessions, and on the belief that no terrestrial explanation adequately accounts for the level of secrecy involved. Each of these interpretations has strengths and weaknesses. The official explanation is undermined by its own revisions. The experimental craft theory lacks direct evidence. The extraterrestrial hypothesis depends on testimony that cannot be independently verified. What remains consistent across all three is the acknowledgement that something unusual happened, that the military responded with a level of urgency and secrecy that suggests the event was significant, that the story has been altered, deliberately or not, over time, and that the complete truth, whatever it is, has not been made public. The Roswell incident has become a cultural touchstone. It has shaped how the public thinks about government secrecy, about unidentified aerial phenomena, and about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It has inspired movies, books, congressional hearings, and ongoing Freedom of Information Act requests. But beyond the pop culture legacy, the incident has had a measurable impact on policy. In the decades following Roswell, the U.S. government established formal programs to investigate unidentified flying objects, including Project Blue Book, which ran until 1969. These programs documented thousands of sightings, the majority of which were explained as aircraft, weather phenomena, or astronomical events. A small percentage remained unexplained. Whether any of these unexplained cases are related to Roswell is unclear, but the fact that the government felt compelled to investigate UFOs at all suggests that incidents like Roswell could not be entirely dismissed. In recent years, the conversation has shifted. The term UFO has been replaced by UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena. The Pentagon has acknowledged the existence of encounters between military personnel and objects that exhibit flight characteristics beyond known technology. Videos have been released. Pilots have testified. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence published a report on UAPs, stating that most incidents could not be explained with available data. This modern acknowledgement does not validate the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but it does confirm that the government takes unexplained aerial phenomena seriously, and that there are things in our skies we do not fully understand. Roswell in this context is not an isolated event. It is the beginning of a pattern of sightings, official investigations, public denial, and eventual limited acknowledgement. The files themselves remain incomplete. What we know is based on fragments, on press releases that were retracted, on witness statements given decades after the fact, on Air Force reports that offered new explanations but could not produce the original records, on missing documents that may have been destroyed, lost, or are still classified. This is not unusual for incidents involving national security, but it is frustrating for anyone seeking clarity, because the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is simply absence, and in that absence, speculation thrives. The Roswell Files are not proof of extraterrestrial visitation, but they are proof that something occurred which the military deemed significant enough to conceal, revise, and eventually explain in terms that still do not fully satisfy the questions asked. What remains unanswered is this: why was the original press release issued at all? If the debris was immediately recognized as a balloon, classified or not, why did the public information officer state that a flying disc had been recovered? If it was an error, who made it? And why was that error never formally addressed? The 1994 report attributes it to confusion, to lack of information, to the pressures of the moment. But the 509th Bomb Group was not an ordinary unit. It was the only atomic bomber squadron in the world at that time. Its personnel were among the most highly trained in the Air Force. If they could not identify a balloon, even a classified one, that raises questions about the nature of the material. If they could identify it but chose to issue a false statement, that raises different questions. Questions about intent, about what they believed they were protecting. There is also the matter of the witnesses. Many of them were military personnel, trained observers. Some held security clearances, some were intelligence officers. They did not all tell the same story, but their accounts share common elements. Strange material, unusual debris field, orders to remain silent. These are not the hallmarks of a weather balloon recovery. They suggest something more complex. Whether that complexity is technological, political, or something else entirely, we do not know. But the pattern is there, and it has persisted for more than 70 years. In the end, the Roswell Files are a study in controlled information. They show how a narrative can be shaped, revised, and controlled over time. They show how secrecy, even when justified, creates distrust. They show how the absence of transparency invites speculation. And they show that even when the government offers an explanation, if that explanation contradicts previous statements, it will be met with skepticism. Deservedly so, because trust, once broken, is not easily restored. And in the case of Roswell, it was broken early. On July 8, 1947, when a press release was issued and then retracted within hours. Everything that followed has been an attempt to manage that initial fracture. But the fracture remains. Perhaps the truth is mundane. Perhaps it is extraordinary. Perhaps it is something in between. What is certain is that the complete story has not been told. Documents remain classified. Witnesses have passed away. Records have been lost or destroyed. What we are left with are pieces of a puzzle that will never be fully assembled. And maybe that is the point. Maybe the lesson of Roswell is not about what fell from the sky that summer, but about what happened afterward. About how quickly a story can be contained. About how effectively information can be controlled. About how a single incident can be rewritten, reinterpreted, and re-explained until the original event is obscured by the layers of narrative built around it. The files are still out there. Some are public, some are not. And in the absence of the full record, the questions endure. What did the military recover in the New Mexico desert? Why did the explanation change? What is still being withheld? These questions may never be answered, not because the truth is unknowable, but because the systems designed to protect it were built to last. To outlast public interest, to outlast scrutiny, to outlast anyone who might remember what really happened. And in that silence, in that absence of answers, the story of Roswell continues, not as history, but as mystery. A mystery written in missing memos, redacted files, and statements that shift with time. A mystery that reminds us that some secrets are buried not because they are extraordinary, but because they were never meant to be found. The desert outside Roswell is quiet now. The ranch where Mac Brazel found the debris has changed hands. The men who recovered the wreckage are gone. The base has been decommissioned, but the files remain, incomplete, contradictory, still classified in part, still raising questions that no official report has fully answered. And perhaps in the end, that is the real secret, not what fell from the sky, but what remains hidden in the documents that followed, what was written, rewritten, and in some cases erased. The story of Roswell is not just about 1947. It is about every year since, every FOIA request, every declassified page with sections blacked out, every witness account dismissed as memory error, every explanation that raises more questions than it settles. It is about the distance between what happened and what we are told, and how that distance, even after 7 decades, has never fully closed.